Good afternoon everyone, my name is Marco Avila, I am an architect by profession and I represent the Catholic University of Cuenca. Within this Horizon 2100 project as Latin America headquarters. It is a pleasure for me to be able to share today's presentation entitled Evolution of Architectural Structures for the Future of Human Habitat. I want to start my presentation with two questions that were born based on conversations that the different professionals have had here in Ecuador, and I think that is the perspective at a global level. The first question is the following. What are the new challenges of earthquake-resistant structures considering the future of design that architects are going to have? Right? In that sense, I am going to share, like many of the colleagues who have preceded me, one of the most important phrases that I take with me to be able to do this research. Everything that one man can imagine, another man can make it come true. Jules Verne says it. A French writer who more than 2 centuries ago had a very analytical, very synthetic thought, and managed to describe the future of humanity with his first steps or the incipient technological advances of that time, projecting them a century later. With these futuristic ideas. It is interesting because he, through his analytics at his historical moment, was able to understand where the future was heading. Maybe he saw prototype submarines, helicopters, space rockets. And he was narrating. In his books, we think about a science fiction idea. However, nowadays we see an airplane flying and it's something normal. Perhaps at that time to imagine that a metal bird of so many tons could be that was incomprehensible. However, I repeat today, because that is completely normal. In this perspective we begin with our analysis. We want to know where the earthquake-resistant structure and the human being's habitat is heading in terms of the design of housing, in terms of the design of buildings, etc., right? For this, considering these visions, we need to analyze theories. We had to analyze theories of the future and we basically based ourselves on 3. The first theory is Little's theory, who he mentions in his research. It is a very interesting theory, because he considers that there are 4 possibilities. Yes, in order to generate probable futures. He says that there could be a first stage where the story or events continue without any problems. However, there is always going to be a limit. Yes, if it is that this limit, the human being remains disciplined in a certain way, will continue without changing, but there will always be events. Historical events that unfortunately generate a decline or a collapse of his social, cultural situation, etc. And that has been seen through time. Several Greek, Egyptian, Roman cultures, etc., have declined due to an event, whether natural, whether human, whether but they also indicate that there could be another event that instead of making a collapse, can transform and make this curve rise. This and that transformation can be new technologies, business factors, etc. Yes. This is the first theory we have studied. The second theory on which we rely to be able to make this analysis of the evolution of man's habitat. This is precisely the theory of Nikolai Kardashian, who indicates that there are 3 types of civilizations depending on the use of energy at the macro level. According to the scale. The first type of civilization, type 1, is that civilization that manages to satisfy its own needs by taking advantage of the energy issue of the planet. Yes. Maybe we are really struggling to get to a sustainable aspect. Yes. And this type 1 civilization. We are wanting to overcome this famous climate change, this famous greenhouse effect and more with this first type of civilization. The second type of civilization is one that manages to master the energy that is in its solar system. We're not there yet. And he says that the third type of civilization is one that dominates energy at the galaxy level. Yes, this is a very interesting theory, very futuristic, but with quite clear bases. He even does analysis, generates equations, generates some important systems that analyzes how this energy system could be generated. And the third theory, the future that we have analyzed, is the theory of Sohail Inerchala, and this researcher proposes 5 scenarios through his research. He proposes a scenario of evolution and progress. He proposes a scenario of collapse. He proposes a scenario that is known as Gaia, which we are going to analyze as a globalization and around the world. I will rather specify this last theory of the future of this researcher, because it is on the basis of this that we are going to work during this exhibition. Well, once we have the theories already studied. Yes. What we have done now is to try to see how this could change the hypothetical future of human habitat architecture into the future. Yes, if these hypothetical futures have been based on Sohal's methodology, each of them has been deepened. It has been shown that each of these scientific evidences, in a certain way, is worth the redundancy, has generated some proposed scenarios with a scientific content, so to speak. Based on the three theories of the future analyzed. If each of them has some similarities, others have some differences. However, based on these theories that each of the researchers handle, we hypothetically propose a future of chaos, a future of Gaia, a future of progress and a future of evolution. If these four futures are the ones that we have proposed and are the ones that hypothetically we want to see if they will be generated or not within a horizon 2100. Which one is this? What is this methodology for the studies of the future that this researcher proposes? This methodology has 6 well-defined steps. The first step is planning. The second step is anticipation. The third, the timing of the future. The fourth, to deepen the future. The fifth, the creation of alternatives of the future, and, finally, the strategies to transform those futures. From the architectural point of view, we have made each of them and described below. In the first two stages, the stage of anticipating and planning. What we have done and the technique we have used for this stage is the triangle of the future. How does this triangle of the future work? It is said that a future triangle works when we have some milestones from the past, some elements from the past that push in a certain way that circumstance of the present and above all, project us towards a favorable future. For all this we should have an evidence, let's say documentary or something like that, to be able to generate the study of each of these proposed future: evolution, Gaia, chaos and progress. The evidence we have based on is 3 in terms of the past, obviously all the scientific literature that exists worldwide. For example, in the case of chaos, we talk about the First World War, we talk about the war theme, we talk about the evolution of conflicts, we even talk about the bioclimatic theme. The Industrial Revolution and everything negative that unfortunately would lead us to a chaotic future in the subject of the present. We also analyze several sources that could have a tendency to generate that future of chaos. Yes. And in the future, what are the evidences we have had? We are based on the philosophy of Jules Verne. We are looking for technological evidence, we are looking for documents or documentary evidence. And we rely a lot on the theme of science fiction through videos, films, movies, documentaries that talk about this chaotic future. We have generated this evidence, or well, we have analyzed this evidence, and in this way there is a projection to a chaotic future. There is a line, isn't there? We see that there are some, for example, some gaps that we have put with red color. These gaps mean that there is not much information for him to collate. Although chaos, we could say that he is going to be one of the most voted. We will see then in the following stages in the most currently analyzed futures. However, there are some gaps that limit us to have information. Like evolution, Gaia, we are already going to see that although there is information, but it is a rather hypothetical future, while progress possibly there is a lot of information, and perhaps this is the one that in this instance one would think that is the future that one is going to have within the. Be careful, these are stages that we are going to be testing, we are going to be analyzing, and we are going to be generating some certain evidence. Then, in the stage of temporizing and deepening, what we have done after choosing these 4 great scenarios, is to analyze the stages, the times, the epochs of how they were generated, or what would be those important milestones through history that allow us to go to that timeline of chaos, of progress, of evolution and of Gaia. For this we have made this representative image where we have the present, the past and the probable future with a horizon towards the year 2100. What does this mean? For example, In the past, in prehistory, we are placing here what are the scientific evidence from the architectural point of view in each of the stages of history and how these milestones that are key in history, transform time and transform events to generate new conditions through history. One of the most important milestones. For example. Yes. It is the invention of writing. Obviously, the issue of industrial revolutions, which is one of the keys worldwide and has been generating several milestones. We don't have the most important ones with blue color here, but the ones with red color are the ones that somehow make the story completely change. The first milestone for us in our study is crime number 18, which in this specific case is the first industrial revolution. Undoubtedly, the conditions branch out here. The first is the issue that there is an industrial revolution that is fully developed. The economic part, the industrial part, is being technified, developed, growing. But on the other hand, another branch, unfortunately, is the principle of global pollution. Well, that's the good and the bad, isn't it? We continue with the evolution. There are other important milestones, yes, that eventually comes to have, such as the issue of globalization, the issue of the industrial revolution, the second or third and even the far milestones that are changing. And here we have put some important milestones that branch out and guide us towards chaos, towards progress, towards evolution. Milestones. Like which ones? The theme of the SDGs, the theme of artificial intelligence, the for the industrial revolution, among others. And that allow us to take out some hypothetical situations that would allow us to reach these probable futures, where chaos is in this line that comes from the theme of the industrial revolution. On the other hand, we have progress, on the other hand we have evolution and on the other hand we're laying the groundwork for these hypothetical futures. After that we are interested in knowing within the research we are interested in knowing what the evolution of the human being's habitat would be in terms of the architectural part, where that part of the evolution is going. In the same way, in this stage of deepening what we have done is in each of the ancient stages of the past of the present and the proposed futures. We have made an analysis of each of the cultures, starting from Stonehenge, Mesopotamia, the pyramids of Egypt, the theme of Greek, Roman temples, etc. And we have seen that throughout the past, the morphology, the architectural components have really been completely orthogonal and with basic figures such as the square, the triangle, the circle, which allowed to generate stability and have evidence to the present of those architectural works of the past. In the present, with the theme of the Industrial Revolution, we continue with this point. The appearance of steel, the appearance of concrete. Modern architecture has had important changes and elements such as cantilevers, such as inclined roofs, such as new elements of a new morphology are beginning to be seen. However, with the proposals of the futures, of progress, of the evolution of Gaia, it is proposed and analyzed through the evidence of the triangles of the future. With these documentaries, with these films and more, all the visual images that some authors have worldwide have been redrawn and there is an interesting trend, as if the shape is beginning to change. There are completely different forms, completely organic, yes, and it completely changes that evolution from that of architecture. And you start thinking and you see the evidence. There are current changes such as artificial intelligence, with 3D printing, with new technologies where the house is already built on its own, but the house is no longer square, the house is completely different. That is why already in the last part of this methodology, we have created based on the concepts, based on the evidence, we have created these 4 scenarios where the first scenario, chaos, as we see possibly by wars, possibly by pollution of the planet, possibly by global warming, etc. And we have to live a chaotic scenario, where the architecture is going to have to change completely. I repeat, a theme of catastrophic. Maybe the issue of underground bunkers, the issue of reusing what exists at that moment, protection, etc. That is the first scenario. The second scenario, the progress of the human being is currently maintained with evolutionary thinking. His ability to reason improves. It can combat the issue of global warming and there is progress, where cities grow in height, Technology supports a lot in this process. It is the scenario of progress, the scenario of evolution. The scenario of evolution would be the one in which the human being passes to the Type 2 civilization. According to Nikolai, he moves on to the Type 2 civilization, where he tries to conquer other places. The technology was better, the progress was completely improved, and we had to colonize other places. And in this search for colonization, it is up to us to undertake new ways of inhabiting these spaces. And we want to go to Type 2 civilization, and why not Type 3? Although I think Type 3 we would be very far away now, yes. And finally Gaia's. Perhaps this is the most utopian, I would say, for one reason only. The human being by nature is selfish, and by nature he also has his concept, I would say, wild. Where we want to conquer everything. We want to conquer everything, and many times we cannot be one, in community, even worse with nature. And that's why I say that we have the issue of the effects of globalization, of global warming, and so on, where Gaia has the proposal that the human being becomes one with nature, and that he takes full advantage of the benefits of nature to be able to coexist with it and be able to generate architecture based on that natural concept, not only from the point of view of sustainable bioclimatic, no, but much further. It is a unique symbiosis that perhaps only until man completely changes his human mentality could generate that. And I would think that evolution and progress would be the main ones before reaching Gaia. But well, this is a hypothetical scenario that in a while could one day be verified. Once we have created the spaces. Well, the idea is now to transform by creating this image as a conclusion of the analysis of these future scenarios, where we have 2x's time and technological progress. It has been analyzed, and it has been seen that technology has always been key during each of the eras to be able to see these advances in each of the cultures. So we say that, in prehistory, for example, all processes are handcrafted, and in the ancient age, as well as in the Middle Ages, all architecture has a completely orthogonal, completely symmetrical, even perfectly symmetrical form. The first industrial revolution is coming. Yes. With the technological part, the shape changes, elements become much more prismatic, much more rectangular and orthogonal. Yes. In the contemporary age and in the present, well, though, with the different revolutions of the second industrial revolution, which is to do with the electric power part. The third industrial revolution, that is to do with the electronic part, with computerized systems, etc. And now we are living for the industrial revolution, which is the famous artificial intelligence, where the morphology changes completely. And the trend is this: the trend is to change the way where architecture is going, and the evolution is this. An evolution of chaos, an evolution of progress, an evolution towards the stage of evolution as such. And the issue of Gaia. And here we have, in a way, a part about the curved part. We say that spaces, because really in nature, are not, because cubic, they are not orthogonal. Everything is curved, and this is exactly what this industrial revolution is taking us towards. This is what this morphological evolution of design takes us towards, and it is the concern we had at the beginning. Where is the evolution of architecture heading? And that's a challenge. That is a big challenge for architects. If this is going to be our future towards here today, how can we think that they will resist the constructions, whether in buildings, housing? What materials? And that's where our second question arises. With everything we have now, how can we create an architecture that allows us to visualize that future, and that in the long run is feasible to realize? We also leave for this second questioning. We start from the fact that the planet Earth has several seismic zones of important magnitudes, and that they are a latent danger. Yes. And we have seen that many times a structure collapses completely after a seismic event. And the second question arises, why do some buildings collapse and others not at the time of an earthquake? Yes. And we have seen that it is given by the issue of the magnitude of the earthquake, by the type of soil, by the materials that have been built, by the construction processes, by the design of the building, the issue of the magnitude of the earthquake. We cannot foresee. Like the type of soil, we cannot predict. What we can change within these variables are the materials, the construction processes and, above all, the design of the building. This is linked with the first questioning. Because the first questioning we saw that the building design was going to be completely weird, not completely amorphous and more like this influences for the construction of now, the present and then the future. And we began to make an analysis especially on the issue of the design of the building. We saw that in the past, the initial forms with the pyramids, with the theme of the temples, with the theme of the different eras, we have seen that they change and have been completely independent, have been completely orthogonal, and that allows generating this process. Then, after that we see that the future does change and they are going to be completely amorphous elements. This amorphous theme, that irregular theme, that changing theme. It is this new challenge that prepares the future for us. To do this, based on the previous results that we had mentioned to you, we began to make the research process towards how are we going to determine that in these architectural structures there is a correlation between the orthogonal, the constructive technical symmetry. And we base ourselves on case studies, likewise from the present past, and theorize towards the future. To do this, we are again based on what we have already seen previously. We chose case studies from the past. These pyramids. The theme of Mesopotamia of the Middle Ages. We work with the Gothic styles, the Roman style. There are some temples of some cultures, and in the Moderna age, the neoclassical theme. The Moderna sculpture as such in the present. Well, some representative buildings and the scenarios of the future, we have redrawn all of them. The first stage was to make the selection of the case studies based precisely on the morphology, to see how it evolves and what our structural challenges are. Once we have this, in the second stage it was just redrawing. So we did the redrawing of each and every one of these architectural elements based on the structural theme, the architectural theme. To then make an analysis of each of them, a completely structural analysis, based on the properties of each of the materials, the shape of the building and the seismic demand. We have put a similar seismic demand on all to see how it works at the level of experiment. And each of them was modeled and each of them was subjected to an experiment. In this case, the experiment takes place in this way and it is verified which of them would fail and which would not, depending on the shape of the materials, the constructive system. The results are very interesting. We have a very big table, and in this table we can summarize as follows. We have the case study drawn on the top, the design, and we have put the design as a completely orthogonal element. The first case, and that it is symmetrical, a symmetrical element but not orthogonal, a symmetrical element but not orthogonal, and a curved element that we are going to see that is completely a random shape, that is born based on that predicted future. We have analyzed the issue of materiality, what kind of material each of them has, and the issue of seismic response. For example, the most important results. The first result tells us that those cases of study where there is a complete symmetry of the element, there is a massiveness in terms of the part of the architectural composition, there is a complete symmetry, there is a fairly minimal displacement in terms of the earthquake. We are especially interested in this axis here. How much the element moves on the x-axis. On the y not much, and we will see why later. But the seismic behavior is quite suitable for the conditions of the experiment we have proposed. What about those non-orthogonal but symmetrical elements? Similarly, if the component is not orthogonal but symmetrical, it also meets an appropriate parameter at the time of a seismic event. What about those elements that are not symmetrical and start to become more slender? We already started as if to visualize those elements of the future. The seismic demand begins to become more complex. The issue of the movement of the building becomes more complicated and the displacement is broader, and that has to do with the issue of materials as well. Remember that since the Industrial Revolution, steel and concrete have allowed us to create architectural works in height, where the structural part is key because the massive weight of the pyramids of the temples is reduced in a certain way, where it was completely massive and becomes more slender. And in this case, there's a latent seismic hazard. What would happen to those completely non-symmetrical, completely lightweight shapes that completely change this new panorama? Similarly, there is a problem at the time of a seismic event. There is considerable displacement. Yes, considerable. We see the past, we see the present, we see the future. But well, what would be the solution? For this, what we have done is the following. We already have the probable future, completely curved architectural elements. If what we have done to this is, analyzing and studying new materials is the key, this is the key. The future is going to be completely different. As for the architectural part, the issue of materials, we are analyzing, studying new materials that are in experiment. Graphite, graphene, carbon fiber, biochar, including materials such as transparent metals, etc., which allow creating new constructive forms, improving their structural theme. That is why we have the architectural form, the new materials we experiment with, and we see that at the time of generating this seismic analysis, this seismic risk completely lowers this seismic risk. In such a way that we show that for a probable future, that obviously the first conclusion is that it will change, that there will no longer be, or with the theme of 3D printing, with new technologies, the architectural form changes completely. New materials are key to making these elements much safer. As a conclusion of these two questions that we have raised in this paper, we can identify that more than 80% of cases, especially from the ancient and Middle Ages, have a completely symmetrical composition and allows greater stability and seismic resistance. Undoubtedly. But beware that these elements of the past, which are massive, which are symmetrical, which resist until now, we have the evidence. Unfortunately, they are very massive, the walls are very wide and take up a lot of space if that's what we want to do today. Unfortunately, the space that we don't have in the architectural part is very affected. That is why the modern age, despite the fact that, and in the moderner age, despite the fact that the spaces are reduced with the appearance of concrete and iron, only those orthogonal elements are those that resist. And those symmetrical elements resist the process of a seismic event. If we go to the future, we see that the future is going to change the shape. But unfortunately, this future with these new forms, if we do not put emphasis on new materials, new constructive technologies, it will not be possible for them to resist large events in seismic matters, clearly speaking. That is why, as a final conclusion, it is of vital importance to propose a line of research on new materials and new construction systems. Well, I conclude with this, and I thank you for inviting me to this talk. If I repeat, my name is Marco Avila, there are my contact details. I belong to the Catholic University of Cuenca. This research is part of a formative research project sponsored by our institution. I am waiting for any questions, any comments. Thank you very much.